I think Dr. John Maxwell says it best. He notes that proactive people will focus on preparing, planning, and reactive people focus on repairing. Check out our first video in the series if you haven't already, which talks about 3 steps that you can take right away while your spouse is still living to help you financially prepare for the death of your spouse or the death of yourself for your spouse. That will help you be prepared so that when the time does come, you can focus on repairing your heart, not your finances. First things first, when you lose your spouse, the most important thing to do is to take care of yourself. You want to surround yourselves with your family, your friends, your church community to help to support you during this time. And while yes, there are financial matters that will need your attention, those things are not urgent in the couple of days or weeks immediately following the death of your spouse. Allowing yourself time to just rest and focus on making the decisions that you have to make during this time will be a saving grace to you. And please remember that making decisions under emotional stress is very detrimental most of the time, especially as it relates to your financial circumstance. So you should avoid making any serious financial decisions while your emotions are elevated. In this video, we're going to look specifically at the first 5 things you need to do with your finances after losing your spouse. It will help to streamline the process. And the process, regardless of how prepared you might be or not, will take a couple of weeks and up to a few months. So after you take the initial couple of days, weeks, whatever that looks like for you and your heart to really process this major life change, and once you feel up to the challenge, please use these steps as your guide. The very first thing you'll want to do is contact what I like to refer to as your dream team. This should be a team of enlisted professionals, ideally that you and your spouse selected together, that have your best interests, financially speaking, at heart, legally speaking, and tax efficient. Professionals to include a financial advisor, a CPA, and any estate attorneys, estate planners that you have enlisted, that you've gotten your will or legal items prepared for. If you don't have a team of professionals already, this is a great place to start. You want to lean on family and friends and start to ask questions about who they work with so that you can get the relationship started. Now, I know that sometimes attorneys often get a bad rap, and rightfully so in some instances. But in this scenario, the death of your spouse, they'll be one of your closest allies. Your attorney should help you understand both the legal and financial laws in your state to ensure that your assets stay protected. And believe me, you'll want your assets to be protected during this type of life event. As far as the CPA or tax accountant, they should be one of the second numbers that you have on your VIP contact list. We talked about that in our first video. I want you to contact your CPA because there are very specific steps that you can take in the calendar year that your spouse passes away, which will be the last year that you have the option to file jointly. And that is very important as it relates to your taxes. Your CPA will be another key ally to ensure that you fully understand the tax implications of losing your spouse. There are very specific ways that taxes can be completed to ensure that you are reducing Uncle Sam's share. And I don't know about you, but my humble opinion is that the IRS gets their piece of the pie, and we're better stewards of our own finances. I would like to see as much of your hard-earned dollars, your spouse's hard-earned dollars, retained in your own family. I saved this one for last, but it really should be the first person that you contact. If you're working with a financial advisor, especially a full, holistic, comprehensive financial planner like myself and the advisors on our team at Oak Harvest Financial Group, this is one of the first phone calls that you should make. I'll share a little anecdote here. I have a client, it was one of the most humbling moments in my career. About 5 years ago, her husband passed away, and she picked the phone up, called my team, and we asked for me, I'm her representing advisor, spoke to her on the phone for about 30 minutes, and she informed me that her husband had passed just the day before. And she was a little bit emotional, rightfully so, panicking a little bit. We talked for about 30 minutes and assured her that the next steps would be taken, and thank you for letting me know. I hung up the phone with her. About an hour after that, she actually called back to the office and was asked to be placed on speakerphone. And she said, thank you to the entire team, because Oak Harvest Financial Group and Jessica were the third phone call that I made. The first two were to my husband's parents and my own children to inform them of his passing. It was unexpected. It had happened very suddenly. And, she was just so grateful in the moment that she knew, aside from calling her very close family, that the next call to make was to her support group, which was we at Oak Harvest Financial Group. And she just felt so relieved and wanted to share that with my entire team that she knew where to turn in one of the worst moments of her life. It was an emotional moment because she also went on to just express how grateful she was that her husband, Bob, had encouraged her to facilitate the relationship with us, that I had encouraged her to be a part of the financial meetings, and that she felt extremely comfortable with myself, with my team, and that she had, played out her husband's wishes, which was to work with professionals. In this instance, she was not the person that was in charge of the household finances. And in the generation of baby boomers and generation older than that, that's not uncommon. The concept of having a dream team is so that they act as a life preserver for you during a very emotional time. Lean on those professionals for their expert guidance, and that will eliminate many of the mistakes that I've seen others make by trying to do it all on their own. The second practical step to do immediately after your spouse passes away is that you're going to want to locate your will or their will and collect copies of their death certificate. Again, the estate attorney is where you're going to want to start with locating the will. If you were proactive and adhered to some of the tips that we shared in our previous video in the series, 3 steps to take while your spouse is still living to protect against their death, you're going to have the will in a safe place already. If you don't, you'll want to contact your estate attorney to go ahead and locate that. Death certificates are another very important piece and something that should be handled immediately following the death of your spouse. You're going to want several copies of death certificates, and death certificates can take 4 to 8 weeks to come through. You're going to need at least a copy for every company that you have any financial connection to. This is the way that you are proving the death of your spouse. It is a legal document, and you'll want to have a couple of extra copies for your own files. The death certificate will be required to transfer assets or update ownerships of assets with your spouse no longer being alive. Many times you can order the death certificate directly through the funeral home. They should be able to assist you with that. If not, or you want to be even more proactive, you can go ahead and visit your city's records department or even send a notarized request to a company called VitalCheck. That's VitalCheck. We'll link that in the description box for copies to be mailed to you. There is a small fee for copies, but it's not going to break the bank. We want these copies to be filed for as soon as possible because, once again, it does take anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to arrive. So be patient during this time. Make that a priority to take care of as soon as possible, and allow that 4 to 8 weeks period to be dedicated to really focusing on your healing while you wait for those documents to arrive. Next up is step 3. The third step will require you to take a few moments of your time, pick up the phone and make some calls. Maybe even some in-person visits to special organizations that are connected to your spouse. One of the very first entities to notify is the Social Security Administration, especially if there's an active benefit that's already being paid on your spouse. In many cases, the funeral home should help you report this to the Social Security's office that your spouse has passed, but you don't want to leave it up to them. You want to avoid receiving additional payments on your spouse's Social Security when they're deceased because you'll be subject to pay that back. Now, here's a tidbit. With Social Security, from the financial perspective, and again, this is something that your financial advisor would help you navigate. If you're both already taking your Social Security checks, it will be the lower of the two checks, regardless of which spouse passed, the lower amount check will go away at the death of your spouse. And that happens once you report it to the Social Security Administration. If you do not report it, or there's a lag time there and you receive that check, you're on the hook for repaying that back. work. And this brings us again back to really sitting down with financial professionals and having that conversation. I've found in my career that especially women, when we get accustomed to receiving mailbox checks, Social Security being one of those checks, that cash flow is very comfortable for us. If you have a financial plan in place, your financial advisor can sit down with you and say, okay, Martha, I understand that your husband passed away. How's cash flow? We're going to be losing the lower of the two checks. Do you need to replace that check? Are you accustomed to getting that, or can you do without? Do you have savings? And that's a part of financial planning. I know for our clients, we try to have backup plans where if a spouse passes away, we can easily, with a quick phone call, turn a check on to replace the lower of the two Social Security checks passing with the spouse. And the same is true of pensions. Only with a pension, if it is a public company that you have a pension with, in 99% of the cases, the pension does go away with the spouse unless you have elected pension benefits, which are spousal benefits, usually a reduced amount of your pension that transfers over to your spouse. Again, these are items that you're going to want to chat with your financial professionals about, ideally ahead of time so that you can get ahead of it. And also, it's never too late. If you are retired and you lose your spouse, you must make sure that your level of income is maintained. Otherwise, we've talked a lot about this in previous videos, it could mean the difference of your lifestyle changing or not. And your spouse and yourself have worked very hard to get to where you are. The last thing that anybody wants is for a lifestyle to have to change financially when you're already under so much emotional duress because it just changed emotionally by losing your spouse. And remember, recruiting your dream team in a time of emotional duress is the most practical step that you can take. You don't want to leave any money behind on the table, especially as it relates to government entities. The next entity that you'll want to contact, especially only if your spouse was a veteran actually, is the Veterans Administration. If your spouse was a veteran, any VA benefits that were being received could be transferable to you, the surviving spouse. And again, you're going to consult with your dream team on this. They should be able to assist you. The third entity to notify is any insurance company connected with your spouse for both life insurance, health insurance, etc. You're going to want to gather all the claims forms and begin the process. The process can take up to 60 days. I've seen up to 90 days for a death benefit to be paid out. And the sooner that you start pushing that paperwork to those companies, the sooner you'll start the process, the faster that you will see the benefits show up for you. Last, notify all 3 credit bureaus. That's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. What you're going to do here is request a death notice to be put on the reports. And this helps to prevent any fraud or someone trying to steal your deceased spouse's identity. That's been a lot of information we've covered so far. And I know that it feels like maybe a little bit overwhelming or like there's just a lot of moving parts here that we've got to take care of. But I want to reassure you that we do have a resource guide that will link in the description box that will help all of this come together in black and white on a white paper for you. But for now, let's keep it moving along and go to our 4th step that we're going to do immediately following the death of our spouse. And that is to notify your spouse's HR department of both current and past employers of your spouse, especially if you're not already working with a financial advisor. You might be thinking to yourself right now, okay, I get, current HR department, there might be some benefits there, or to notify them that, hey, my spouse passed away, polite thing to do. He won't be showing up for work. If you're not working with a financial advisor, oftentimes it is common for folks to leave a former 401k at a former employer. And the reason that you want to call previous employers is to make sure that that's not your situation. It could literally be hundreds of thousands or thousands at least, tens of thousands of dollars in a 401k that is just sitting there and not being actively managed. And you would be very surprised how some retirement 401ks or pension plans from past employers were never transferred. And it could literally be money just sitting on the table there for you and your family. So don't assume. Make the call to be sure, and don't forget about yourself. Call your own HR department and let them know what's going on in your life if you are still working. Okay, last step to take immediately following the passing of your spouse. It's time for you to update your asset ownership. This step can take a while if you have multiple companies that you're going to need to contact. Again, a pro tip from our first video was to create a VIP list, keep it in a binder with all things finance related so that you have a go-to list of important professionals and companies to reach out to. This could take a while. You're having to get on the phone, you're working with your team of professionals, so go easy on yourself in getting this step done. It will simply take some time. You'll want to be sure that you have the death certificates already in hand, as they will be required to update any asset ownership or transfer any assets. Here are some examples of assets that you'll want to retitle. Your property titles. This includes your home title, your vehicle titles, registration, and also notifying the county recorder for tax purposes. Your bank accounts, of course. That could involve a quick visit to your financial institution or a quick phone call to update any joint accounts and change the language on those accounts that now will say payable on death, and you'll update the beneficiaries that were more than likely previously your spouse, which is transfer on death. Again, we visited this in our first video in the series. With the deceased spouse, you'll want to update those accounts so that your accounts, the assets that are now transferring directly to you ideally, will also bypass probate as they transfer onto your beneficiaries. And this is really a conversation that you should be revisiting at least once a year with your financial advisor. Your investment accounts. You're going to want to work with your financial advisor to get all of your investments updated, including your beneficiaries. Maybe your spouse was the person that was the money person in your household. Maybe the husband is a little bit more risky in the accounts and the wife is more conservative. Well, when your husband passes away in this example, it might be time to reevaluate your financial plan and how your assets are allocated within that plan. I'm sure I'm leaving something off the table to be discussed. Again, the best advice that I can give you is to be proactive. It is highly unlikely that you and your spouse are going to pass on the same day at the same time. You'll want to have these conversations while your spouse is still alive. If that's not your situation and your spouse has already passed and that is how you found this YouTube video, please don't panic. You can take some of these steps right now that are going to help you. And the best step that you could possibly take is to develop your dream team. To set up some appointments. Generally, they are complimentary when you're sitting down for the first time with an estate planner, a CPA, or a financial advisor, giving you an opportunity to see if it's a good fit. You want to work with professionals that can have an unbiased, unemotional perspective on your finances and legal items, because it's going to be a lot for you to have to make financial decisions, especially if you are not accustomed to doing that in your household. So that's really, if you heard one thing from this video, beyond order the death certificates as soon as possible and start on those life insurance claims if you have them, it's to really armor up and surround yourself with support in the way of having a financial advisor, a CPA, and an estate planner. And if you've got a great financial advisor, they should really be the person that is acting as the liaison, not only between the estate planner and the CPA, but also yourself, keeping you informed so that it's all centrally built around you, the client of those three professionals. All right, we made it. I know that it seems like a lot of steps, but I can assure you that having this plan will help to eliminate some stress during one of the most difficult times in your life. And as I've shared before, the most important thing to do after you lose your spouse is to take the time to grieve and to surround yourself with a support system. Allow yourself to take the time that you need to walk through this loss in a healthy way, and then you can take on all of the financial steps that you have over the next couple of weeks. And have grace with yourself. This is a major life event, and no matter how much planning that you have done proactively, and hopefully that is your situation, we will never be emotionally prepared to lose our spouse. To make it easy for you as far as the planning is concerned, we have a comprehensive checklist included in the description box for your convenience that you can go ahead and have these steps outlined for yourself. And please pass it on to somebody else that you know may be going through a situation such as this. And even more so, just married couples that maybe haven't had this conversation yet, because the best advice that I can pass on is to have these conversations, to have some semblance of a plan established while your spouse is still alive. I believe that it is one of the greatest acts of love that can be displayed. If you hung with us with the whole video, I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to remind you that this is a series that we are doing under the theme of survivorship, practical advice that you need, steps to take while your spouse is still living to prepare for a death, steps to take immediately after. We're going to have a great interview with an estate attorney in our next video. Also a CPA will come a little later in the series, and then we'll talk very specifically about what type of financial advisor you want to look for and how they can be of great value for you when it does come time that you are facing such a big life change in the event that you lose your spouse. If you haven't already, I want to remind you to ring the notification bell, of course subscribe to our channel, and drop a comment below on any information that you feel like you'd like us to dive a little bit deeper into, or topics that are of interest to you as it relates to survivorship and the death of a spouse. Thanks again for joining me today, and I look forward to having you back in the next video up in our series.